how you guys doing? It's your boy Beastly back at it again with another episode in the Potential Prodigy series. If you guys are new, this is basically where I give you an in-depth scouting report, a cheat sheet, if you will, where I give you guys the numbers and the data to recruit as many Elite Dev, Star Dev, and Generational Dev prospects as humanly possible, while your other online league mates and the CPU can fight over the Impact Dev / Normal Dev prospects. Very quickly, gonna throw this into the intro. I've gotten a ton of questions in Discord, in the comments, in my live streams about like, where have you been, yada yada yada. Is the series dead? No, I literally think I say this every episode and every stream, but I'm doing it for every single archetype, for every single position. I'm doing it solo. Takes time. You guys know how it goes. On top of that, of me doing the research, data collection, yada yada yada. I've also been sick, not sure how good or bad I sound this moment, but I've had a sinus congestion issue, upper respiratory issue for about a week and a half now. So been sick along with dealing with some personal stuff. So all this stuff does kind of weigh me down and slow down the uploads of this. But if you do want to show your love and appreciation and incentivize me to keep cranking these out, make sure to hit the like goal for this video. We're going to set the like goal at a very modest amount of 250 likes for this episode. When I hit 250 likes, I will stop what I'm doing and begin working on the next archetype for the middle linebackers. Another thing I might as well go ahead and say at the beginning of the video, I stream almost every single day at around 6 o'clock CST, especially Monday through Friday. So if you got any questions, want to see me do rebuild challenges, testing, science stuff, yada, 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 and much, much more, go ahead and pull up to the streams. It's a fun time almost every single day. Pretty consistently streaming at least once a day. So there you go. Also, Discord, link in the description. Discord has the cheat sheet in it. It's entirely free. No, I don't feel the need to nickel and dime my audience to give them readily available information. So if you would like to have the data from these videos, there you go. It's right there. I guess I can go ahead and flash it on screen right now. So yeah, the cheat sheet is basically exactly as you can see. I have the position, then I have the archetype, then I have their stats, their numbers, the stuff I compile, and much, much more. So yeah, it's directly into the online dynasties in the CFB 26 section. So yeah, I think we're at like 11 or 1,200 members, which I appreciate you guys. Much love. And I think we also just cracked, I think 53 or 5,400 subs. So appreciate y'all. All that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into the video, shall we? Now we got all that intro stuff out of the way. Let's go ahead and hop into the signal caller archetypes. So the actual ranges for these guys can be all over the place for a few stats, but pretty narrow for others. Awareness can range from the low 70s to the mid 70s. Speed can range from the high 70s to the high 80s. Acceleration can range from the mid 80s to the low 90s. Strength can range from the mid 70s to the low 80s. Play rate can range from the low 70s to the mid 70s. Tackling can range from the high 70s to the mid 80s. Hit power can range from the mid 70s to the high 80s. Pursuit can range from the low 80s to the mid 80s. Man coverage can range from the high 60s to the low 70s. Zone coverage can range from the low 70s to the high 70s. But all those ranges, basically, they're just numbers. They're just words. Why is Pierre Chase a generational prospect? Well, here's why. So of all the stats Pierre Chase has, we'll cover them individually very quickly. So he has 75 awareness, which is the highest awareness stat I have found in my data. The lowest I found was 70. The highest I found was 75. Next, he has 88 speed, which again ties him for the fastest I've ever found, being 88 speed. The slowest linebacker I've ever been able to document was 78 speed. So that gives you a nice little 10-point range there for speed. And I guess that does make sense. We'll, again, cover why momentarily. Acceleration, he has 89 acceleration. The best I've ever found was 90. The lowest I ever found was 85. So he's 1 point away from perfection. His strength is 80. The highest I've ever found was 80. Again, maxing out that category there. Along with the weakest linebacker I've ever found was 76. Play rec, his of a 74. The best I've ever found was 76. And the lowest I've ever found was 70, which puts him just 2 points away from perfection. But given the fact he has perfect speed, perfect strength, and perfect awareness, and near perfect acceleration, I can forgive the 2 play rec gap right there. Next, he has 85 tackle, which does tie him for the highest I've ever found at 85. The lowest tackle I've ever found was 78. He has 86 hit power. The highest I've ever found was 87. The lowest I've ever found was also 74. In pursuit, he is 84 pursuit. The best I've ever found was 85, and the lowest I've ever found was 80. Man coverage, he has a 72. The best I've ever found was 73, and the lowest I've ever found was 67. For zone coverage, this gentleman has 76 zone, which is really, really, really good. And the lowest zone I've ever found was 72, and the highest zone I've ever found was 77. So he's basically 1 point away from perfection on things like zone, on pursuit, stuff of, acceleration, and then he's 2 points away from perfection on play rec. But overall, this guy is just exceptionally good. Obviously, as a generational prospect, he's going to be good, but that's why he is good. He has such high stats in those key attributes from what I've been able to document that you can pretty much just look at Pierre Chase, even without the little green gem next to his, little player icon. He's going to be good. But of all of the stats I just listed to you, all, 8 stats? No, 10. All 10 stats I just listed off to you, not every stat is created equal. I know, shocker, hot take. And again, I don't always advise this, right? In my opinion, you should always look at all of their stats and make the judgments based off all of their attributes. However, I have noticed a pretty common trend, specifically with the signal caller of middle linebackers, that you can only really need about 3 of them. Those 3 stats being speed, hit power, and play rec. I have noticed that typically the faster the middle linebacker signal caller is, the higher hit power they have, and the play rec they have, I have noticed those 3 stats tend to be really high on Elite Dev and Star Dev prospects, and they tend to be kind of more towards that average or lower range on the lesser prospects. Which isn't shocking, right? Speed's a stat that can be pretty much used for everybody, so that's not really, anything new. Play rec was interesting, though, because play rec, I had no correlation with defensive linemen and corners. So it was very odd to me that linebackers do need play rec. Again, I have noticed that the 74, 75, the 76 play rec players do tend to have a dev trait, whereas the 70, 71, 72 guys don't always consistently have a dev trait, which I guess makes sense for their position, right? Middle linebackers are the quarterback of the defense. They got to make a lot of calls and adjustments, so having play rec tie into their stat spread does, I guess, make sense. What I really found interesting, though, was also hit power. Hit power ranges, as I said earlier, between 74 and 87. That's a 13-point spread. Now, by no means am I saying, can you not have an Elite Dev signal caller middle linebacker who's slow with middle hit power and middle play rec? No, you can't, right? Obviously, you could have bums with Elite Dev and Star Dev, and you can have really good players with Normal Dev and Impact Dev. It's kind of, down to the EA luck of the draw, the RNG. But generally speaking, you want to put yourself in the most advantageous spots most of the time, because there's a lot of stuff in this game that'll screw you, and you're not having EA have more hands in the nonsense than you want. So generally speaking, if your guy has high speed, high hit power, and high play rec, most of the time, that dude's going to be a stud. Another stat I'm going to go ahead and bring up for an honorable mention. You would presume one of the coverage stats would actually matter, and you would be correct. However, it's not zone coverage. That did shock me. Zone coverage, obviously, you want it to be as high as possible, obviously. But what I have noticed is that zone is kind of like how if you watch the defensive line video, for speed rushers, the finesse move range was only 4. It was, I think, 84 to 88? I forget my own notes, but the actual range between the floor and the ceiling wasn't very high. The range wasn't very wide. So you might have a guy with, mid-80s finesse move, and you think, wow, that's amazing, but it's really not when his floor is like 83 or 84, so it's really not. The same thing with zone, right? The best zone coverage I ever found was 77 zone, and the worst was 72. That's a 5-point spread. And again, the best I've ever found was 77 zone. For most of these linebackers, you're going to be seeing 73, 74 zone, which is just a couple point spread. So zone did not matter anywhere near as much as man did. Man coverage was not at the level of hit power or speed or play rec, but man coverage was also right there, where I did notice that the linebackers who could play man coverage did typically also have a dev trait. However, I did not notice it at a consistent rate as the hit power, speed, and play rec combination. So Again, I advise always to look at the entire picture. Don't just look at a little piece of the puzzle or a specific part of the picture. Look at the entire picture for its entirety. And generally speaking, if they all have good stats, they're going to be a good player. But if you're super lazy and you just don't care, want to just turn your brain off and click the A button and then keep going, speed, hit power, play rec, if they have those three stats very high, you should do fine a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. The next example I'm going to go ahead and show you is for Warren Marshall. We're going to quickly cover his stats. He's Star Dev, so he's just a little bit worse than the generational dev I showed you previously. And I think when we, break down his stats, you'll see how he's just a little bit worse than the guy we just covered. 74 awareness is one away from perfection, so that one's really good. Not going to harm him there. 85 speed, he's 3 points slower than the previous gentleman, but 85 speed is definitely nothing to slouch on, right? By no means is Warren Marshall slow, but again, like I've mentioned, there's different categories, right? Like if you have somebody who's like low 7 or high 70s and like 81, 82 speed, 83 speed, that's kind of just like normal, right? Like it's not special. Once when you get to that 84 speed, 85 speed, it's like, okay, things are kind of getting faster here. And then 86 speed onwards, really when you start to see the upper percentile dev traits that do typically spawn. So 85 speed's not bad, but he's just not as fast as the previous gentleman, and that would explain why he's not Elite Dev, because he's Star Dev, so he's not going to be as good. Same thing with acceleration. He has 88. The previous gentleman had 89. He's just 1 point lesser than him, 2 points lesser from perfection. They do tie with the same strength, which does kind of make sense because strength, I have noticed, has very little correlation with dev traits. So I've had very strong middle linebacker spawn with normal dev and very strong middle linebacker spawn, without dev. So with or without strength doesn't really typically matter, but he does have 80 strength, which does tie him for the best. Play rec, as you guys can see right there, 76 play rec. He actually has better play rec than the other guy. Mind you, it's by, I think, 1 or 2 points, but still, 76 was the highest I've ever found. So Warren Marshall, even though he is lacking in some areas, he does over excel in others, which again, I think does justify the Star Dev rating, and it does make sense. Tackle of an 82. Could be worse, could be better. I'm not going to say it's like the worst tackle rating I've ever seen, right? Obviously, the worst tackle rating 78 and the highest is 85. His tackle could be better, but it's also not the best, which again explains the Star Dev. Hit power of an 80, really just mid. Just literally the definition of mid. 74 is the lowest on the hit power range, and the 87's highest. Dead center, could be better, could be worse. Along with pursuit, middle range as well, could be better, could be worse. But upper percentile man coverage, in fact, 73 man is the highest I've ever found. So like I've mentioned earlier, you can kind of blindly, again, don't advise this, but you can kind of blindly judge people based off speed, hit power, and play rec. And if you look at that formula for him, he has good, not elite speed, he has decent hit power, and he has elite play rec. So just with those 3 key attributes, I could assure you he has a dev trait. Now, because he's a 5-star, that would probably imply it's more towards the elite or star side than the impact side. But don't worry, I have some bums to show in this video because I always get those obligatory comments. Well, of course they're going to have a dev trait. They're a 5-star. No, 5-stars are not guaranteed dev traits. 5-stars can be bums. 3-stars can be bums. Anyone can be a bum, right? The point is to look at their stats to judge them, not just, oh, they're a 5-star, therefore they have to be good. In these two people's examples, they are good. But again, I will show you examples where they're not good, and it's going to be like, wow. But yeah, if you just do the speed, hit power trifecta, or a play rec trifecta here, he has very good speed, he has decent hit power, and elite play rec. So I could assure he has a dev trait of some variety, along with the context clues being a 5-star. So he has a decent chance of it being more towards the star or elite dev, not impact dev. But then you look at his man coverage, 73. That's generational. That's literally top percent. So he's crazy man coverage. He has good strength, right? And then zone of a 76. The best I've ever found was 77, and he's 1 away. So this guy overall has a lot of very good stats in a lot of different areas. So I can see why he is Star Dev, right? Obviously, if he had probably 4 to 5 more hit power, if he had like 2 to 3 more speed, if he had just 1s and 2s here and there, better tackling, a little bit of pursuit, stuff like that, he would be Elite Dev, but he's not. He is missing in those key areas, which would explain why Pierre Chase, is better than him. Is because, well, Chase has those stats, whereas Warren doesn't. Very simple like that. And I guess why I was just speaking of what the bad ones are, let's go ahead and cover Madison Roach, which again, normally in these videos, I always remove the filth. I remove the lower percentile bad players, just so that way there's more eye candy for you guys to look at. But again, I always get those funny comments of like, just people who, mouth breathers, glue eaters, and crayon sniffers out here leaving the most brain dead takes. Madison Roach, as you guys can see, normal dev, but I don't really need the game to tell me he's normal dev to see that he is normal dev. Again, just quickly cover the speed, hit power, play rec trifecta. 81 speed is horrifically slow. That's only a few points away from minning out, which is a bad start. 77 hit power is in the same category. That is horrifically slow. That's just a few points away from minning out. And obviously, play rec of a 70 is horrifically bad because that's the bare minimum you can have being 70. So he literally fails every single point of the speed, hit power, play rec, little quick check. And he's a 5-star. But if you break it down further, awareness of a 73 is kind of in that mid-range, not great, not terrible, just in the middle. Acceleration is pretty good, right? 88's not bad, but the lowest you can possibly have is 85. So he's, I'll give him credit. He has good acceleration. Strength, 76. Literally the worst you can physically have is 86. Tackling of an 80 is 2 points away from minning out. It's terrible. Pursuit, 81, 1 point away from minning out. 71 man, I will give him his flowers. That is actually not the worst thing I've ever seen. The worst is 67. So he is okay man coverage. It's not elite or anything, just okay. And then lastly, 74 zone sounds great, right? Okay, at least his zone's decent. The lowest you could have 72. So he's 2 points away from minning out there. He's overall just a terrible signal caller 5-star middle linebacker, and just one of many examples of why you can't just blindly recruit people. You got to look at their stats. You got to be able to look at them as an entirety and make those proper judges. Because if you're a struggling program, right, Madison Roach, who is normal dev and he does suck, he might be good enough for really bad programs, even with normal dev, that like he's just starter for you. But if you're an elite program, if you're several years into your dynasty and you're just having a factory of just printing first-round picks like I do, this guy will never sniff my roster unless I'm physically forced to recruit him because he's so bad. And then on the inverse, we have Waquez Nix. I probably butchered that. But we have Mr. Nix over here, which we've already covered, I think, 3 examples already, so I probably shouldn't spend too much time. You already know the numbers. I've repeated them over and over in this video. Pause the video here, jot them down on a piece of paper, and look. But very quickly, he is Star Dev, 5-star. Why is he Star Dev? Well, he is 1 point away from perfection on play rec. He is exceptionally high hit power at 86, and he's very fast with 85 speed. He passes the speed, hit power, play rec, trifecta check, along with passing the man coverage check, the zone check, decent pursuit, decent tackle, decent awareness, good acceleration, and, pretty good strength. So he pretty much passes everything with flying colors. Now, obviously, if they were higher, right, he'd be elite dev. But for a star dev prospect, that's very, very, very good. So there's several examples of good players and several examples of some bots. Now, before I get the comment in my Discord or the comment on this video, hey, Beastly, I have found some 4-stars who are elite dev or star dev that don't have any of the stat profiles you've mentioned. That's unfortunately how the game works. I always try to, reference this, especially in the beginning of the videos, but 95% of the time, if your guy has crazy speed, crazy hit power, and crazy play rec, he's going to have a good dev trait. But that 5% does happen. As you guys can see with Edward, not even going to pronounce that last name, Mr. Edward over here. He is star dev, which I think most people would classify as a good dev trait. Speed, bad. Hit power, bad. Play rec, bad. Strength, bad. Awareness, bad. Right? He's terrible stats pretty much across the board, but he's star dev. That's just unfortunately how the game is hardwired. There has to be randomization because basically if the devs always tied dev trait to stats, people like me would figure it out and then it would cause chaos. So there is that 5 to 10% random element where you'll have a guy with crazy high stats who ends up being normal dev or impact dev, and you'll have just some bum who looks disgusting with star dev or elite dev. But like, why would you plan for that 5 or 10% when you can plan for the 80, 90% that always, the odds are much more in favor with those guys. So you should prioritize those guys, right? Obviously, you can get burned. Stuff like Edward over here can spawn, especially in the 4 stars. But hey, for every probably 3 to 4 of these guys I'll miss per class, per cycle, I'll get 10 to 12 other studs. So, am I missing a few every year? Definitely. But do I care when I'm getting so many players? No. If you guys watched my previous live stream at LSU, or as I'm calling it, Bust U, because we were only recruiting Bust for that school, year 1, I literally had a draft class spawn of linebackers where I'm not even trolling. We had like 12 Elite Dev prospects across all linebackers. It was one of the most disgusting classes I've ever seen. And who would have thunked it? All of them fit the speed, hit power, play rec formula. And I'm sure I missed a few that didn't fit that formula. But, you know, when I'm getting an entire room filled with Elite Dev and Star Devs, I'm not going to cry about the few I'm going to miss. I have no idea if this will or won't end up making the cut for the video. Normally the sections where I'm scrolling through hundreds of players to show you the 5 to 10 that end up making the video. Here's just another example. I'm not sure if I've already covered the normal devs or not, but here's a normal dev 5-star who's #1 in his state, who's 3rd overall in his position, right? He's very highly ranked, but again, those rankings mean nothing. I've said that probably 1,000 times. They don't mean anything. We have Marshall Fueoko. These names, can't you give me a Jimmy, a Jason, a Michael, just something basic, EA? But Marshall over here, normal dev 5-star, very quickly, speed, hit power, play rec, speed bad, play rec bad, hit power decent, but that's not very good. Then you look at the rest of his stats: tackling bad, awareness bad, acceleration bad, strength bad. He's bad in so many areas that I'm not overly shocked he's a 5-star normal dev, because, you know, like I've always mentioned, just because you're a 5-star doesn't mean you're always destined for greatness. So just, there you go. I guess very quickly for the video, I can also show you an example of a 4-star who's really good. These do spawn very frequently. I think in terms of my hit rate, I think I had more good 4-stars than 5-stars overall, just because getting a 5-star to spawn was pretty difficult. But you have a Devontae LeBourne over here, almost LeBron, which would have been super funny of a name. But Devontae over here, 4-star gem, Elite Dev, you can see that. But why is he Elite Dev? Awareness 72, kind of in that mid-range, not elite, not terrible, just in that mid-range. 84 speed. But Beasley, didn't you just say 83, 84 speed was bad for a 5-star? Yes, it's bad for a 5-star, but this is not a 5-star. This is a 4-star. Is there a stat difference between a 4 and a 5-star? Yes. But is there such a difference where I have to label them differently? Not really, right? If he's an 84 speed 4-star, to convert that into a 5-star, he's probably 85, 86 speed. And that's probably a good way of looking at it, is that if you were to convert them up a tier, what would their stat spread be? So even though he's an 84 speed 4-star, that's still incredibly fast for a 4-star. And then as a 5-star, that'd be 85, 86-ish speed. So disgusting speed, check. Acceleration, again, he's 87 acceleration for a 4-star. Converting that to a 5-star would be 88/90 speed, which upper percentile for that, check. Strength, very good again. Uproot that 1 point. There you go. Play rec of a 73. He has better play rec than the 5-stars I've just listed. Now, mind you, those 5-stars were normal devs, but you can see the picture here that this kid's insane at everything. Tackle of an 81 is the first stat where it's like not the best, right? That's just in that mid-range. Same thing with hit power. Hit power is the first stat where it's like, again, not the best. Could be better, could be worse, but in that mid-range. And then pursuit is just awful. I had to triple check my notes. 80 is the worst you could possibly have. So that's like the worst stat he has by far, is his pursuit, minned out. But then if you look at his man coverage, 72 man puts him 1 away from perfection. So if he was a 5-star, he would have 73 man, which again, even though it's not as important as speed, hit power, and play rec, man coverage is still very important. And this guy has insane man coverage. And then he is decent zone, 74. Could be better, could be worse. Honestly, if that was a 5-star, he'd have probably 75 to 76, which would, again, put him upper percentile. So even though the numbers are a little different, and I do in these videos cluster them together, they are technically still, again, different. So here's an example of just a super stud 4-star, which for most metrics is just disgusting. And he's disgusting because he's a good player. Fun fact. I got 2 more examples I will show you for this video. We have Leland Caps over here, which I would classify as one of those random, just pure luck Elite Devs or Star Devs, because if you look at his metrics, he's pretty bad. 70 awareness is garbage. 81 speed is garbage. 80 acceleration is really good. Actually, I scratched that. That was pretty good. Strength, 79, also pretty good. Play rec, the worst you can possibly have at 70. Tackling is really bad. Hit power is 1 away from minning out. That's really bad. Pursuit's really bad. Man coverage is bad. Zone's decent. This guy, if you were to look at him, is a normal dev. But like I've mentioned, are a few of these guys going to slip through every cycle? Yes, right? It's just how the game is designed. Not everything is allowed to be 100%. So again, if you follow my instructions, 90% of the time you will hit. Unfortunately, stuff like this will slip the cracks, but if you're getting, again, 12 to 15 Elite or Star Dev linebackers and 3 to 4 are going to other schools, you can probably pick them up in the portal a year or two and you'll be fine. Now, this is the guy who I will end this section of the video with, because speed, he has, as you can see, he's a 4-star with a gem. 4-star and a gem, and you see 87 speed. So you're probably thinking to yourself, Beastly, this guy has to be generational. He has to be Elite Dev. I'm going to get him in my, my online dynasty. Cortland Toon over here, he's going to be amazing. He has gold instinct, which is a wild mental to spawn with for a linebacker. You're hyping yourself up, and then he's impact dev, and you're like, what the hell happened? Well, like I've mentioned, let's do the little trifecta first. Speed, oh yeah, upper percentile speed, check. Speed, 1000% check. Play rec, though, is only a 70, which is tied for the lowest stat you could have at 70. And then hit power is not good, but it's also not bad. It's just in that middle range. Highest being, I think, 87? Yeah, the highest being 87, the lowest being 74. So 80 hit power is literally in the middle. So speed, yes. Play rec, no. Hit power, meh. What about the rest? Awareness is decent. I'll give you that. Acceleration, I would also say that's decent. Again, 85 is the worst you could have, so he's only 2 away from the worst, but he's also a few away from the best. So I'd probably, after rethinking about that mid-video, it's probably more towards that mid-range. 77 strength is 1 away from minning out. That is horrible. 83 tackle, not actually the worst, right? The worst is 78, excuse me. The best is 85. So his tackle is really good. Pursuit, again, 80, worst you could physically have. Man coverage, again, the big one, the thing I always tell you to check is the man coverage. 67 man coverage actually ties him with the minimum you can have at 67, and then his zone's pretty good of a 75, highest being a 77, but for some reason, zone matters less to linebackers, specifically the signal caller archetype. I don't know if they're all going to work out this way. Again, haven't recorded the other videos yet, but if they're all going to match this pattern, man coverage matters more than zone, which is odd because I think most linebackers spend more time in zone than man, just my opinion. But I had to include him in the video because people like this are like the reverse of the other guy I showed you, where that other guy has putrid stats and he's somehow an elite dev, whereas this guy has, he has the gem, he's a 4-star, he has speed, and then he's disappointing. Now, obviously, could you still develop him? Oh yeah, if you have the right perks and the right coordinators, you can develop anybody in this game. But that's not why you click on these videos. It's not for a guy that'll take 3 to 4 years to develop. You want the guys that can get a 99 overall in 1 season, if not 2. But yeah, I've pretty much covered, what is that, like probably, I think on my end for the recording, I've probably just put 25 people in the video. Obviously, I don't know which ones will and won't make the final cut, but yeah, I just spent an hour, just a little fourth wall break here. This video is now an hour and 13 minutes long in recording, and when you guys see it, it's probably going to be between 35 and 40 minutes, so that's fun. Let's go ahead and cover the next portion of the video, which is what do they look like when they leave the scouting report and they actually get onto your team. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to cover this segment of the video. I'm only going to show one example because unfortunately, Denzel Harvin is quite literally the only one I have on all of my save files as being a freshman non-upgraded signal caller. Every other signal caller I have access to has already been upgraded, which taints him for this portion of the video, or he's not a middle linebacker. He's been moved, so I'm not going to show not. I don't think the abilities changed, but he is the only middle linebacker freshman signal caller I have access to. So unfortunately, the sample size for this will be 1. I like to show a few, but I don't really recruit signal callers, as I just learned. I mostly recruit lurkers and thumpers, so that's cool. We have 4-star Elite Dev Denzel Harvin from my Rice rebuild, which is on YouTube, by the way. You can go watch that whole series. Let's go ahead and quickly cover his stats to see if Denzel Harvin's stats reflect the scouting report stats that we've just been covering. Awareness, play rec, both bad, right? Straight up bad. Even for a 4-star, it's still bad. So right off the gate, not a good start. However, he immediately then switches that up by having 86 speed, 80 acceleration, which are both elite, absolute elite speeds, which does help contribute towards his elite dev trait. 80 strength, tied for the highest you can physically have, being 80 strength. 81 hit power, not, the worst in the world. Again, not elite, but not terrible either. 81's a respectable amount of hit power along with 80 strength. Runs dropping, 82 tackle, which is pretty freaking good. Best being 85, worst being 78. So it's like upper mid percentile, not bad. Pursuit's kind of bad. 81 would have liked that to have been higher, but that's not bad. But then, as you can see it, aside from his speed and his, other stats that do help contribute to him being elite dev, bada bing, bada boom, right there. 72 man coverage for a 4-star is insane. The cap is 73, so he's 1 man coverage away as a 4-star from having the same man coverage as a 5-star, which is just insane. And then he does possess 74 zone, which is, I think, 3. Yeah, it's 3 away from perfection, but like we've already covered or documented, zone matters far less. Zone matters far less for this archetype than you would assume, which is just odd, but that's just how the game works, sadly. So yeah, this guy's generational man coverage, solid tackle, solid pursuit, great strength, solid hit power, and then elite speed. So that is why, and again, this is a 4-star, right? Again, if you were to like uptick his stats, if you were to convert his stats to a 5-star, he would probably have like 72, 73 play rec to like 71, 72 awareness. Probably have like 88 to 90 speed. He'd have 80 strength, probably 83, 82 hit power. So if you were to just upvote his stats just a smidge to compensate for his lack of star rating, he'd be one of the most insane that I can show you. But unfortunately, he's all I kind of can show you because I, again, don't recruit this archetype very well, so I don't have many examples. So we're going to very quickly cover the abilities they have. Mostly because I think overall, this is kind of the weak point of the archetype. Aside from the stats and stuff, I think the signal caller archetype just has weak abilities. I know abilities kind of matter a lot in gameplay, and a lot of, most people, like 98% of people don't get to this part of the video. So if you actually made it to this part of the video, go ahead and leave a little rice emoji down below in your comment question or comment, and I will know that you've watched this far into the video, which I appreciate you. But very quickly, let's cover these abilities, shall we? Takedown. This ability makes no sense for a linebacker because most of the time they don't have power moves or finesse moves. So if you are blitzing them to actually get use out of takedown, they cannot be touched. So you have to basically be blitzing at least 6 to 7 people to get actual value out of this. But it's weird because it's also tied to the strength stat, and strength is very expensive. So it's a lot of work and a lot of investment for something that doesn't make a lot of sense. I get for a defensive lineman, sure, but for a linebacker, the platinum is an increased chance to cause fumbles, which is cool, but the work you have to do to get there is kind of annoying. And we'll cover a different ability momentarily that also increases your chance of getting fumbles, and I think that one's far more worth it. So, but takedown, mid, wrap up. This ability is interesting because at platinum, it prevents you from basically getting juked or spun out. You could basically always conservative tackle people, which can be useful. But as you'll see momentarily, there's another ability that you have that also dictates how you tackle people. And so they end up like conflicting with one another. Workhorse, again, hyper situational ability. From my experience, it's not that difficult to recruit 9 to 12 elite linebackers per cycle. So I can always have very good second and third string linebackers, which means if I'm going against an opponent that has a lot of wear and tear and fatigue stuff, I can just rotate my backups in. It's not that hard. Linebackers are a lot like running backs, in my opinion, where you could have 8 good running backs on your roster and never need to really worry about, wear and tear. But if you're playing against an online opponent or a league where a lot of wear and tear is done, obviously get the workhorse. But from my experience, linebackers don't get fatigued that much, generally speaking. So Super weird situational ability, just like takedown, super situational. Then we get blow up, which is easily, hands down, unequivocally the best ability they have. And I used to be a hashtag blow up hater, but now I'm a blow up defender, which is a crazy sentence I just uttered. Pause, no diddy. You guys get the picture. But blow up prevents your player from basically getting impact blocked. Impact block is the moment in which a lineman or a receiver or a blocker essentially hits your defender. If you want to do some nasty stuff, some real grade A degenerate stuff, if you're getting spammed by RPOs, have this on a corner, on a safety, sub that safety in at corner. And if the receiver tries to, again, block on an RPO, he will pancake that receiver and bare minimum tackle that the receiver catching the ball for a gain of 0. But if you have high enough, speed, play rec, and zone, they could pancake that blocking receiver on an RPO and then pick 6 that on a screen. So this ability, if you're getting cheesed with RPOs, run this ability on a safety. I wouldn't really put it on a linebacker and move your linebacker to corner. That just seems like a mess. But get this on a safety, and it's insane at stopping RPOs. And if you have this on a linebacker, basically no offensive lineman can block you. That is pretty much what I've learned. At Platinum Blow Up, there was no offensive lineman in several leagues I'm in that could block me. If my opponent tried to run an inside zone or a counter or a toss or literally any blocking play and a lineman tried to put his hands on me, I would just pancake them. And it was really comical when receivers or tight ends would try to block me because I would just kill them. So Blow Up is unequivocally the best ability they have, and it's tied to block shedding, which is a stat you should always be maxing. So W stat, W ability, Blow Up, unequivocally the best thing. It's great for screens, right? If you have a lineman trying to, go out on a screen, unless you don't get back there with your user quick enough, you could just pancake the lineman. It's really funny, great gameplay, a lot of pros for this. Very versatile. So Platinum Blow Up, 1000% recommend. And next we get to Hammer, which is the other problem I have with a lot of these abilities, is that Wrap Up and Hammer both can't simultaneously work. So either you're committing to a conservative tackle or you're committing to a kill shot with a hit stick, but you can't do both simultaneously. Now, with Platinum Hammer, from my understanding how Platinum Hammer works, you have an increased chance to cause fumbles, which is great. That's a massive, massive plus. But it also prevents your opponent from breaking out of the hit stick animation. Unless they have, I think it's called Tank. I think if they have Tank offsets Hammer, but otherwise, if you have Platinum Hammer, they can't break out of your hit stick and they have an increased chance to fumble. So why would I ever go for a conservative tackle if I can go for a hit stick that increases my chance to get a turnover, which in this game where there is basically no defense that gets played, that's kind of a big deal. So obviously there are certain instances where a wrap up will suffice or Hammer would suffice, but considering how easy it is to upgrade your tackle versus how difficult it is to upgrade your hit power, it kind of feels like wrap up was the far easier option to get. But I think Hammer's overall the better ability. If you can guarantee a hit stick every single time, and you can guarantee a conservative tackle every single time, I think in the long run, Hammer's better. It also causes more fatigue, more wear and tear, turnovers. So if I had to rank these abilities, Blow Up is unequivocally their best ability they have, easily number 1. I would say number 2 is Hammer, even though it's very difficult to achieve. I would say number 3 is Wrap Up. 4 would be Workhorse, and 5 would be Takedown. I just don't see any value, right? Because if your lineman if your linebacker gets caught by a lineman, you're not getting off that block. You have like low 60s, low 70s power move and finesse moves, unless you're a psychopath and you're upgrading power move and finesse move for a for a zone linebacker, which would be weird, but I guess those people do exist. But generally speaking, takedown is just, I think if you're trying to make the QB fumble off sacks, just blitz them, have them get unblocked, and then hit stick them, right? Hammer would do the same thing as Platinum Hammer and Platinum Takedown do the exact same thing. They both make the person fumble. Hammer gets used when they're not the quarterback. Takedown only affects the quarterback. So there you go. Overall, a very interesting deep dive I've done for signal callers. This video is approaching 2 hours long. Let's go ahead and get to our shout outs, shall we? And let's go ahead and wrap this bad boy up. As always, I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, night, afternoon, or day, depending on whatever time you watch my content in the future. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Drop me a follow or sub on Twitch. I'd greatly appreciate that. And if you can, please become a member. Members get early access to all my videos, whether it's a few hours early, a few days early, weeks early, or what happened in December/January, a whole month early worth of content. So early access to all my content, extra perks in the Discord, perks with voting for stuff on live stream. You get a lot of extra benefits. So I greatly appreciate that. Thank you for everyone who became members, who are members. Shout out to all you beautiful bastards on screen right here. And shout out to all these members as here as well. I appreciate y'all, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.